looking for. Okay, so I am now looking for my meeting link. It's not showing. I don't know why. Oh God. Can you hear me, please?
Yes. Yes,
okay,
we
so
can.
I don't know what's going on. My video has gone off and I'm trying to get it back. That's why I can't see you guys, but I think you can hear me. So I want to see if I can log back on and see what happens.
We can also see you.
Sorry, I can, sorry. Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm so sorry for this. Well, I want to welcome you to today's discussion, and we're talking about the future of sustainable cities adapting to changing climates. And I'd like to call on Dr. Oluwatoyin Adejonwo to please give us introductions and then introductory remark, and then we can start off. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. It's an honor for 3CSD to host this pertinent conversation today about a topic that touches every one of us. It's the future of sustainable cities in a rapidly changing climate. So across the globe, cities are growing faster than ever. Statistics estimate that by 2050, nearly 70% of the world's population will live in urban areas. But so with this growth comes, of course, it comes with some challenges. Two of the challenges that I can think of right now is, number one, how do we build cities that not only sustain life, but also thrive in the face of climate change, particularly because developing countries, as we know, are vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So sustainable cities are not just a dream, they are a necessity. From cities like Lagos to London, I'm quite happy that we have Mr. Bankole here, who is a policymaker in Lagos State. From Nairobi to Cape Town, there are issues of rising temperature, flooding, and extreme weather. And these are no longer distant threats. They are our current reality. And as such, adapting to these changes means that we need to rethink how we build, we need to rethink how we move, that is transportation, and we need to rethink how we live. Now, this future calls for bold innovations such as green infrastructure that absorbs water and reduces heat, buildings powered by renewable energy, transportation systems that are clean. But it's also important to emphasize that it's not just about the technology, it's about the people. Now, true sustainability ensures that no one is left behind, especially the most vulnerable in our communities. And achieving the sustainable city that we desire, it requires so many things. It requires active, urgent, and deeply collaborative measures. So cities must engage citizens, they must empower local leadership, they must embrace nature-based solutions. I'm happy we have Mr. Toyin Oshaniwa here with us. And we must prioritize equity, resilience, and long-term planning over short-term fixes. So the future of our cities depend on the choices that we make today. It's very important for us to build cities that are not only smart, but also just, green, and that are resilient. Finally, the Center for Climate Change and Sustainable Development, 3CSD, is truly excited to host this panel of distinguished speakers, which includes experts, academics, policymakers, and a non-governmental organization. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tony. Okay, so I'll just give a bit of a, I don't know whether to go back into the introduction because you've already given quite an extensive thing, but that just to keep discussion going. Climate change is one of the most pressing environmental and socio-economic challenges of our time. It is threatening global progress towards sustainable development. Cities, which is of course home to more than half the world's population and is hub of economic and social activity, are on the front lines of this crisis. Now, like Dr. Tony mentioned, we have rising temperatures, extreme weather events, and dwindling natural resources. All these are putting immense pressure on urban system. And for African cities, rapid urbanization has further compounded all of these vulnerabilities, often taking place amidst inequality, underdeveloped infrastructure, and of course, limited adaptive capacities. Now, today's webinar, like she has mentioned, I just want to reiterate, will examine the future of sustainable urban development in Africa, focusing on inclusive, innovative, and locally relevant strategies for building climate resilient cities. Today's discussion is intended to explore smart technologies, green infrastructure, indigenous planning practices, nature-based solutions, all of this she's mentioned before, policy-driven community engagement, and it will help to highlight how equitable urban planning can address both environmental and social justice concerns, ensuring that no one is indeed left behind in the continent's response to climate change. And I have with me three very distinguished speakers this morning, and their job is to give us their experts' perspectives on the different areas where they work and how it is that we can achieve sustainable development for cities. And we have with us this morning Mr. Bankole Michael. Sorry, I'm going to start with you, sir. Is he on this call? I can't seem to see his name. Mr. Bankole, are you here, sir?
I'm here.
Hi, good morning, sir. So Mr. Bankole Michael Omoni is the Director of Climate Change and Environmental Planning at the Lagos State Ministry of Environment and Water Resources. He has over 23 years in the civil service. He has led key climate initiatives, including the Lagos Climate Action Plan, Energy Roadmap, and the city's participation in C40 Climate Action Planning Program. He's a frequent speaker at national and international conferences. He shares his expertise on climate change, waste management, and policy. Mr. Bankole is also deeply committed to capacity building and mentoring within the public sector. His dedication to knowledge transfer reflects a passion for nurturing the next generation of sustainability leaders. He holds a degree in industrial chemistry, a postgraduate diploma from the Maastricht School of Management, and is a member of the Institute of Chartered Chemists of Nigeria. Our second speaker for today is Mr. Tony Oshaniwa. Mr. Oshaniwa is the founder of Nature Cares Resource Center, a knowledge-based NGO dedicated to environmental education, climate advocacy, and policy engagement. Under his leadership, the organization empowers communities, especially young people, with the knowledge and tools to take meaningful action towards environmental sustainability. In addition to his work with Nature Cares, Mr. Tony serves as the carbon operations lead at Up Energy Group, where he leads the development and implementation of carbon projects. He is passionate about advancing climate action, strengthening environmental policy frameworks, and building inclusive platforms for knowledge sharing and collaborations. Our third speaker is Dr. Janina Stunasiovitz. I hope I have not murdered your name. Dr. Janina is an interdisciplinary scholar and advocate for inclusive urban development. As the founder of What Equal Partnership, she leads a global research initiative that collaborates with city actors in African intermediary cities to co-create solutions for challenges linked to migration, displacement, and climate mobility. Her commitment to bridging research and policy is reflected in her roles across several international networks. She contributes as a peer reviewer for the UN Network on Migration Knowledge Platform and is an engaged member of the UNHCR Global Academic Interdisciplinary Network, GAIN, the African Climate Mobility Research Network, CAMN, and the Cities and Human Mobility Research Collaborative at the Zolberg Institute. So you see, I have quite an impressive lineup of speakers this morning, and I would like to start with this. What are the key climate vulnerabilities faced by African cities, and how do these impact infrastructure, housing, and livelihoods, particularly for urban poor and marginalized communities? I'm going to do a pick this morning. I'm going to start with Mr. Bankole. Mr. Bankole, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As introduced, I work in the Ministry of Environment and Water Resources as the Director of Climate Change and Environmental Planning. When we talk about vulnerabilities faced by African countries, I don't like to go far into the African continent, but I have to look inward. We all know that Africa bears the brunt of climate change impact, and by evidence-based data that we have conducted here in Lagos, we were able to streamline our vulnerability into three major distinct causes. That is sea level rise and rising temperature and extreme flooding or extreme precipitation. So these are the things that we suffer with in Lagos, being a low-lying city. And Lagos State, for everybody that cares to know, is a very, very small, that's a very small landmass area of 3,577 square kilometers. And then out of which is 22% is water. So, and I want to also believe that many African cities also share the same similarities with Lagos State. I've been to East Africa, where I know that the temperature there is very, 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 very high. I've been to Northern Africa, Niger Republic, where I know that they suffer from drought and extreme temperature. So you can see that cutting across Africa, even the most developed ones in Africa, the one that share borders with European countries, we seem to have similarity in the things in what we pass through, ranging from what I've mentioned: sea level rise, extreme temperature, extreme flooding, drought, heat waves, and of most recent, we are suffering from urban heat island because of the way we construct our residential buildings and even our commercial premises. So from my side, I would say these are the things that African cities suffer from. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that perspective. And we're using we might have to use Lagos as our case study this morning. But then, I'd like to hear Dr. Jamina's view. Dr. Jamina, please, can we hear your perspectives?
Hello, good morning. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. So I was wondering, I really like this format with questions going back and forth. But what I did in preparation is that I created a short PowerPoint presentation with basically a short 10-minute contribution that would answer the questions. So instead of splitting all of that up, would it be possible that you go for the other two speakers and then afterwards give me 10 minutes?
Okay, I think we can work with that.
Sorry for that.
Okay, hello, Dr. Shani, Mr. Shaniwa, please. Mr. Shaniwa?
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. I think that was a smart, adaptive presentation from Jenna, having all our questions put in. I think that's the way of for the future city. I think that's one of the ways to think in developing the future cities. Of course, I won't go further to our questions. But respect to the question you asked, how vulnerable are African cities to climate impact? Thank you, Mr. Bankole. I've also laid the foundation, Lagos State as a case study. But looking generally across Africa, just as you have said, we share similar kind of impact. Flood, as we know, is key, and flood is one of the key things across cities that lie across the coast, Lagos State, the Accra, and the. So I think flood is one of the great impacts we see that will affect the cities, and that has already been happening. I think 2 days ago, there was a clip that came from DRC, the city capital where they experience a lot of flood in conjunction with poor management of waste. So one is the flood, another is with the increased population in cities, we will be having more waste generated. And as you know, waste also contributes massively to one of the challenges across cities. Poor waste disposals are key issues that affect African cities. Across Africa, I think only 10% of those wastes are being recycled, like in Nigeria and across other African countries. I think for Nigeria, we generate about 2.5 million tons of waste per year. So waste will continue to be a factor that affects other
Be back in a minute. I've got an appointment. Be back in a minute.
Also, I want.
Yes, please.
Can I continue? Since there's some background noise. Okay, so I think another issue I would like to point out is security. With more influx into the urban settlement and cities, what we have is security. And across Africa, we can see that security is a challenge. That is something we should be thinking of in terms of planning for a future city. How do we address security challenges within the cities? Look also into food, what I will have called agri-food, where I'll say food and nutrition challenges. As you know, most of those food comes from rural settings. One of those things is with the increase in temperature, we are bound to experience more food spoilage or food waste. So how do we address food waste? How do we tackle food waste when it comes to the city? How do we address nutrition aspect of the food that are being consumed in cities? I think these are issues also we are looking at in respect to the future city development. Disease. Issue of disease is something we should look into. I think the world is more prepared, let me say a bit more prepared after the post-COVID. I think we should be looking towards how cities can be, how can cities be more prepared to have an effective across board. The offspring from flood or from also quickly, we should be thinking about the issue of air pollution. Transport, as we know, is one of the greatest emission of these greenhouse gases, as we said. I think from Lagos State, I'm not too sure. From the greenhouse gas inventory, I think Mr. Bankole can speak more to that. Transport is about 20%. For Lagos or for Nigeria, I think for Nigeria, about 20%. So the question is, how do we start planning better transport system, clean transport system with clean energy usage? Not only that, also with the increased temperature, we have to also research more into the impact of it on our road system. Because sometimes we don't plan. When we plan, we don't look at the texture, the structure, or the strength of those roads for future city development. So these are some things we need to look into in terms of to be more resilient and how do we improve clean transport system. So there's a lot of things we can talk about. Just to add to what I've been said, these are good. Another one I would love to speak about, impact of climate change on our heritage, culture. But when we talk about people, we must not forget the indigenous people, culture, heritage. These are the things we don't really think about. But these are things that affect us in terms of loss of maybe revenue, income, in event around tourism, what we pass on to the next generation. Energy is causing an increase in the heat temperature we are observing now. There will be more consumption of energy for cooling. What are the ways we can address cooling system in the future in terms of the use of air conditioner, refrigerator? How best can we promote energy efficiency? How best can we promote the use of... So these are some of the things that surround when we talk about a future city or how climate affects our city. From the team, we already discussed sustainable city lies on pillars, just as Dr. Toyi mentioned at the beginning. A city that must, first of all, be safe, a city that must be inclusive, a city that must be resilient, and a city that must be sustainable. Sustainable economically, socially, environmentally. We need to look at those things. How does climate change affect those pillars? And then we can speak to how best we can build a future city. So I will stop now from here and give room for further questions.
Thank you so much. That was quite extensive, and you captured virtually everything that was running through my mind, from transport to energy to waste management to the insecurity, which is one part that we don't usually consider in discussions, climate change discussions, and talking about sustainability. So on the second, I'd like to ask this question as well. How can sustainable urban planning and governance support African cities in adapting to climate change while promoting social equity? Now, Mr. Toyi, you mentioned something towards the end of your remark there. So I would like to start with you on that again. Mr. Toyi? Mr. Shaniwa? Mr. Shaniwa, please. Okay, so Mr. Shaniwa.
Yeah, I'm trying to mute.
Yes,
I can hear
okay.
you. I was trying to mute. Sorry, I'm in a remote place, so I'm trying to manage both everything. So your question, please, again.
I said, how can sustainable urban planning and governance support African cities in adapting to climate change while promoting social equity? Towards the end of your remark just a couple of minutes back, you mentioned something about inclusion and sustainability. So I'd like you to give us your perspective in this area as well.
Okay, when we talk about how can sustainable urban planning and governance support African cities, okay, so sustainable urban planning, as I say, we're looking at cities and urban settlement, and how can we be more deliberate in our planning and our governance. First of all, the policies, I believe many African countries have policies. I'll leave that to Mr. Bankole, who's the policy maker, but we have a lot of policies there, both from the national, both from the sub-national. I mean, for Lagos State, for example, they have the resilience strategy plan, if I'm correct. They have the Lagos development plan for 2065, if I'm very correct. They have the climate action plan for 2025. Nationally, we have the national adaptation plan framework. For 2020, we have I'm just trying to remember those frameworks. So we have the policies and the framework. So I think one of the things we should be looking about is implementation. But as you know, all these are based on political will. So I think there should be more engagement away from the okay, as we said from beginning, we do more policy dialogue. So one of the things I would suggest is for sustainable urban planning, there must be effective and efficient dialogue with both the policymaker and those who implement those policies. So these are always the gap we see. Many of the policymakers might not really have deep understanding of these issues. So it is our role, both as those in the academics, those in the non-profit, non-governmental organizations, to work together with them to build this dialogue and understand how this affects each city. Every city has its own peculiarity. So, for example, if we look at the issue of, I talked about the issue of energy or transport. So if you are talking about transportation, for example, Lagos State have done so well, at least in the past, and now also in the present, they're still doing, promoting better alternative transportation in terms of the blue line, the red lines, and the rest. The use of the buses, the BRT bus rapid transport system to promote a pool of people to transport. But the question is, how inclusive are those transport systems? At least I've used those transport systems, but the question is, people with physical challenges, can they actually make use of those BRT? In other countries, I believe, like where sometimes we visited, the buses are being designed to be able to incline so that those who have physical challenge can use their wheelchair to use on the bus. So how inclusive are these buses? So that's one of the issues we think about. Then when we talk about the issue of knowledge gap, where we come in also is that how as the institution of learning been able to imbibe or what I call it now, let me say imbibe more learnings into the system. If we are talking about a city of the future, are we still basing our teaching, our curriculum on the old curriculums of the 70s or the 80s? How inclusive, how well informed are those knowledge of learning now to help bring about new innovations, new creation in those areas? So if we are able to speak to better energy use, it to bring about new energy skill, new learning for the new generation. And these are the things that we think planning comes in. So when we are designing learning, we look at what are those things that are there now and be able to change those learning content or courses to suit what the future city we need. Sustainable urban planning also is very key in respect to building. I think one of the greatest challenges is building infrastructures, the design. So one of the things that we see these days that how our policymakers also be working with those professionals, the architecture, the town planners, and the rest in planning for a well-designed city. Well, I think Lagos have been doing well. Abuja also have some good design. So the question is, the materials we use, are they resilient? Will they be able to stand the current impact of climate change? What are the standards? What are the codes that are there to regulate those building materials? There are lots of innovations around there about building materials. How do we promote circular kind of economy within the building industry? Because these days what we do is to keep going for new materials. But how can we promote circular economy within the building industry where old materials can be recycled for future use? So planning can never be emphasized. And this, as we plan, it must align with government policies or government agendas or initiatives. But this can best be done when all parties are all aligned together, both the planners, those who are in government, and the professionals. We all need to come together when we talk about designing a future city. I will leave that for now. I know finance is key. I love people like to talk about finance, but I always leave finance at the back end. So we can always leave finance at the back end, but it's very important. The project need to be funded, but it can only be effective when there's effective and harmonized planning within the whole sector. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaniwa. Mr. Bankole, he said something about participatory planning being a very key feature for ensuring sustainable urban planning. Would you like to share your perspectives, please? Mr. Bankole, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Ebere. Yeah, I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. You can go ahead, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I want to thank you to Oshaniwa for laying down that elitist framework. I call it elitist because sometimes, in the climate change space, when we meet ourselves, we speak big English and we speak what should be futuristic, and we use developed countries as a benchmark for what we go through in Africa or go through in Nigeria if we want to streamline it to where we are from. And I've also read from one Adiola comments on the chat box and talking about we are fast becoming a concrete jungle. Now let's look at it from the beginning. Professor Ladipo said something one day. He said we have not even seen the impact of climate change. What we are seeing is that climate change is still preparing to hit us hard. And then we should also be grateful to God that we are not our condition or our situation cannot be related to what happens in the West, where they have hurricanes, tornadoes, and all those stuff. It's good for us to talk about sustainability. It's good for us to talk about inclusivity. It's good to talk about the building for the future. But what I think climate change talks, what the mantra or the hallmark of climate change is being able to, evaluate what has been, so that, or you said if you don't collect data, you don't know how to manage. Now we must look at where we are coming from as an African and as Nigerian, as a Lagosian. I think sustainability for me, the way I would say it, is ensuring that the people themselves understand what we are talking about. Because many a times we speak English. Yes, we have policies. We have so many policy documents. We have so many frameworks, both at the national, the international, and the local level. And the NGOs work so much, the government works so much. However, the synergy is not there between the gown and the town, the university, the government, and the NGO. Many a times, people call themselves climate change activists. And I believe that word is a little bit strong, because activism does not bring solution. I think advocates bring solutions to what we go through. Now, let's look at the issue on the ground. We can talk about land use planning. We can talk about green infrastructure. We can talk about participatory governance. All these are good. But when you streamline it to how climate change impacts the woman in the village, how the climate change impacts people as the urban slum, because there are so many urban slums now in Lagos. And one thing I know about slum is that if we destroy a slum today, we are going to create 2 or 3 more slums, because the people must find a place to live. Now, we talk about energy saving, we talk about green area, but let's go to the basics. Look at how climate change affects individuals. When Mr. Shannon was talking earlier in the first question, talk about security. Now, it is on record that the migration from the rural to the urban is about 70 to 30. Everybody wants to come to the urban area, and nobody is ready to do agriculture anymore. So that is where the food security is coming from. Everybody wants, the city does not know what is going on in the rural, and the rural area continue to deforestate our forest in order to provide energy for them to live. So what I will say, number one, is that all of us must sit at the table, look at the problem holistically, and create solutions that are tailored to our problem, and not look at it on a global level. If you talk about what Lagos State has been doing, for instance, the word from COP20, I think COP27, is about decarbonization. And when we ask ourselves, can Nigeria decarbonize? Can we truly decarbonize? Can we ask everybody to use cleaner gas instead of using the old method of cooking? Is their financial capability able to carry what we are asking them to do? So if we don't look at this thing holistically, we'll be making policy and we'll be making frameworks that are not applicable or that are not useful to the general public. It will remain elitist. And that is why Mr. Shaniwa can also bear witness. We try to change the way we do our policies by including the people that matters. We must not eradicate the way we did before. I was in Tokyo some years ago, and I saw urban slum within Tokyo City. So it's not as if slum is peculiar to us, but we must look at the slum and try to recreate or create something that they can work with. Policies are there, but policies are not, they are documents, but implementation must have a human face. We must sit down to define strategies. I'll give you one quick example. There was a program that we want to begin to run now about empowering small, medium scale entry enterprises with renewable energy. Now we quantify how much it will take them to pay for a 1 kVA, for instance, of inverter, solar inverter system. And the thing is that many of them cannot even afford it, because even the solar inverter system for 1 kVA is even more than the total package of what their business. So now what we did was to do an evaluation, working with their body, FIWON, to say, okay, we have a certain amount of money, and the donor has said we should go into renewable energy. Give us willing members of your association that can take this from us on an instrumental basis. We are willing to wait 2 years before we can recapitalize. So I believe that with the policy, we must also look at the problem. Let the people that these things are affecting define the solution to themselves. And when we talk about wetlands becoming living area, I think United Nations, one of the charter of United Nations is that everybody has the right to live, to housing. And when we have this massive migration, unfortunately, I think the financial status or the wealth of the prosperity of Lagos has placed Lagos at the forefront of the problem. When we see many migration into a small space that is now causing, a lot of stress. And that's why we have our Lagos State residence strategy, a lot of stress to the infrastructure. And people must live, like I said earlier on. So to me, everything that Mr. Shaniwa has said is good. Having the governance structure, having urban planning, having green and blue infrastructure. But I want to say that for us as academicians, for us as policymakers, for us as non-governmental organizations, we must begin to look at local solution. Local solution is the only way we can be sustainable. 2 Saturdays ago, I was at Akodo-Ise. That place is almost gone. But we can see what the community are even doing to themselves. They are selling the upland to realtors, and they are living very close to the water. So the reality is that most of the time, they don't even know what they do. They are fixated about the money. But when you sell your good land to people, and then you are living in where the sea, the palace of the ballet can no more be inhabited. Part of the city or the town is already in the Atlantic Ocean. So it means that many of them don't even have the education of what we are talking about. So we must go to them, educate them. That's how you can build sustainability. If they don't understand, all this Dogo-Torrenti, pardon my French, all this English that we are speaking will not work. We go to them, we speak to them in the language they understand, we fashion solutions that will help them and make them more resilient. That is what we need to do. In the urban city, we can be doing elitist things, but in the community, we must give them solutions that is going to help their lives. I will stop for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So one of the considerations will be affordable housing, access to basic services, community engagement, which you've just spoken about, then climate and understanding climate change adaptation as a concept on its own, and of course, improving what we call early warning systems in terms of the flooding that Mr. Shaniwa mentioned. And because of our time, I think I'm going to allow Jamina to make her presentation, and then we can continue. Jamina, please, are you ready?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I share my screen? Is that okay?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Great. I can actually not. Can someone allow me to share my screen?
Okay, they'll have to. Okay.
Okay. Now it's going to work. Great. Thank you so much. Okay. Can you see what I see?
Yes, we can now.
Wonderful. That is great. Let me just get to the language. Here we go. Okay, thank you so much for the invitation, and sorry for kind of changing the format you planned. I'm a migration researcher, and so I thought in order to complement the broad and really diverse insights on climate change in African cities that we have from the other two esteemed speakers, I would like to zoom in on the ways that climate change affects patterns of migration and displacement in African cities. And so the research and the recommendations I'm going to share, they're based on the work of the Equal Partnerships Project. It's a policy-oriented research corporation that brings together institutions from Africa and from Europe. And so together with African, we call them intermediary cities, you might know them as secondary cities, we focus on really creating very practical knowledge and mapping processes to develop multi-stakeholder partnerships. And these partnerships that involve local and national and international actors aim to support local governments in addressing migration and displacement and climate mobility in urban contexts. So when I say climate mobility, I'm sure you're familiar with the term, but it's basically migration or displacement in contexts of climate change. So in the following 10 minutes, what I want to do is to argue that African local governments could really prove the missing link for localized and cross-sectorial policy responses to shape human mobility as a safe and as a proactive climate change adaptation strategy, and also to protect people's right to remain in their place of residence if they choose so. And this engagement on climate mobility by African local governments, when I talk to other researchers, but also when I talk to international organizations or national governments, they are often rather surprised when I say it's about cities, it's about local governments, because they argue that local governments do not really have legal mandates to address migration and displacement, and therefore have really limited resources. But nevertheless, there's a growing number of local governments in Africa that try to find partners to engage on questions of migration and climate change. And so therefore, there's an important window of opportunity at the moment. Now, we've already heard that the African continent is really highly impacted by climate change and by sudden and slow onset disasters and environmental change. And this forces people to move within countries and to a lesser extent also across borders. Now, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which is the research institution of the Conference of the Parties of the COP, highlights that this trend will accelerate in the years to come, because they consider that Africa's cities will really be hotspots of climate change and climate-induced migration. Now, in parallel, climate change will also make certain cities much less habitable, leading to out-migration of these cities. And so in this context, adaptation measures are key to ensure people's right to remain in their place of residence if they choose so. Now, the thing is a bit that contemporary and political and academic discussions on African urbanization, on migration and climate change very often focus on capital cities and metropolitan areas. And that's actually quite surprising, given the fact that African intermediary cities or secondary cities, and I give you here a definition of what I mean by intermediary or secondary cities, they already now represent the highest relative share of African urban areas and cities. Cities with fewer than 300,000 inhabitants are forecast to host over 70% of new city inhabitants in the coming decades. You can see here a graph of that shows basically that especially in Africa, this intermediary or secondary cities are really a big share of the urban spaces there are. And African intermediary cities, they are often first destinations for people who move in the context of climate change, because people may consider these urban areas more accessible in social, economic, or cultural terms than capital cities. But on the other hand, intermediary cities often have limited capacities and resources to adequately address climate mobility, and they suffer themselves from consequences of climate change. And research shows that people moving in the context of climate change often end up in marginalized and hazard-prone urban areas. So there is definitely a need for action in African urban areas to address climate mobility in a proactive way. And we can see that at the national and regional levels, there's a variety of legal frameworks that could be used to support action on climate mobility. For instance, regional free movement protocols and agreements that relate to the protection of displaced persons. But those frameworks, they are concerned primarily with the role of African national governments, and they're largely silent on the role of local governments. Now, at the same time, we can also see that over the last years, African national governments have begun to recognize the importance of climate change effects on urban areas. When we have, for instance, a look at the national reports to the Paris Agreement, we can see that in 2022, 49 out of 53 national reports have featured some urban issues. But quite ironically, this has not led to a broad collaboration between local and national governments. And local actors are often still not considered central partners to address climate mobility. And that's a big problem because local actors, local governments, local NGOs or migrant and refugee-led associations, they really bring specific assets to the table. They have context-specific knowledge, and they have specific access to communities that are affected by climate change. So our research shows that locally centered multi-stakeholder partnerships that include local and national and international actors could really strengthen policy responses to climate change and improve urban action on climate mobility. So in the second part of this short presentation, I would like to share some concrete recommendations for collaborative policy action to address climate mobility. First, it's about developing multi-stakeholder partnerships. So national and international actors planning climate mobility interventions should develop their programming in close collaboration with African local governments and with affected local communities, because so far, national governments, but also international organizations, development actors, they quite often only involve local actors at the implementation stage, but not at the planning and development stage. And this joint planning and development is what is really key when it comes to climate mobility. The second one is about mainstreaming climate mobility, also immobility, into local policy making. And here the focus is on the fact that African local governments can win a lot by including climate mobility and immobility considerations into local urban planning and policy making. And that national governments could actually support such actions by providing funding for specific positions within these governments that focus on these topics, and that development agencies and research institutions and civil society could support institutional learning and capacity building. And then also city networks could play a role, like United Cities and local governments of Africa, by promoting peer learning between local authorities. The third recommendation is about improving hosting capacities of secondary cities and enhancing registration opportunities. Because dialogues between local and national governments could really form the basis for an expansion, both of local governments' legal mandates to address climate mobility, but also of local governments' access to national funding on these topics. That could increase local governments and cities' hosting capacity and enable them to develop partnerships with civil society, with national agencies and international actors to address the needs of communities impacted by climate mobility. And then it would also be really important to enhance registration opportunities for people on the move that would allow local governments to include migrants and displaced persons in early warning systems and early action initiatives in advance of extreme weather events. The fourth recommendation is about strengthening bottom-up data collection and analysis, because so far, data on climate change, also on climate mobility, is often national or international level data, but it's not broken down to the urban level. So here the recommendation is for international organizations and national governments to support the creation of local data collection networks via local data centers to collect data that is important to urban migration and displacement. And then the fifth point and the last recommendation is about local government access to international climate funding. And here the recommendation is really that international and national funding for climate change adaptation and mitigation needs to be localized. national governments and international funding institutions need to open channels for local authorities to access financing and funding, including in the Climate Loss and Damage Fund for Developing Countries, which is currently established. So in closing, let me just emphasize that climate mobility often takes place from rural to urban areas. But at the same time, secondary cities and towns will also experience increasing numbers and severity of natural hazards. So what we need is proactive leadership and multi-sector collaboration between local governments and national and regional and international actors. So urban-centered multi-stakeholder partnerships have a key role to play in strengthening urban resilience in climate change contexts, in supporting people who move due to climate change, and in ensuring people's right to remain. Now, if you would like to know a bit more about these recommendations and the underlying research, there is a policy paper that I published with a couple of colleagues recently, and I will put a link later in the chat. Thank you so much for letting me do this presentation. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Demina. Thank you so much for that. That was very, very concise and well put together. And at this point, because she's taken the time to go through every area of the questions she is meant to answer, I'll still come back to Mr. Bankole and Mr. Shaniwar, and then we could take some questions. And please, if you have your questions, can you please send them to the chat box so we can read them, in case if we don't have time to ask each individual participants to individually ask their questions or make their comments. Thank you. So, Mr. Shaniwar, I'd like to find out what you think are the roles for national and subnational governments, what roles they can play in driving urban adaptation and resilience. And then are there any successful models you would like to, that you're aware of, that you'd like to share with us, or best practices that we can learn from at this stage? Mr. Shaniwar.
Yeah, I guess you can hear me. Yeah.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
You can hear me.
You can go on, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much, Janela, for the scope of the partnership mode. I can learn a lot about the partnership model she has presented. And just as pointed by Mr. Bankole about we being more practical and realistic towards how we address those issues. Yes, I agree with him totally. And that's why from our own as a non-governmental body, one of the things we see is that is to interpret those policies and laws, national and the sub-national government. But I hope you can still hear me. You can still hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes. Yes, we can still hear you.
I can see you frozen at the point.
Your connection is not very effective, but we can hear you.
So, and then doing actually a practical work on adaptation with farmers and the rest. So we have both national policies, we have national laws. Of course, if we talk about the national, we have to bring in the National Adaptation Plan Framework. Also, we have the NDC that is there talking about our adaptation abilities and steps they want to take. We have to talk about the national Lagos State Climate Change Action Plan. So there are policies and law. I would say, I'm more of an advocate. We look into those policies and try to interpret them how it speaks to a common man or a community or people that are affected by this climate change. So yes, there are policies and role. That is the role of the government. The government to provide that enabling framework that everybody can be a player. It takes those policies existing in the field there, either as a professional or as a practitioner. How do we interpret those policies and how can we use it to implement real life change? I think that's the question. And that is where I think we come in. So for example, in the beginning, I made a bit of an example from what Jen has done. There are some cities, Lagos State tried that at a bit of a time. what we call smart office, for example. How can we reduce traffic on the road? How can we reduce people being congested going to the office? We can have smart office or smart hours of work. Everyone does not need to report to the office at every time of the day. That is just in a way of controlling traffic flow, reducing the impact of the impact of transport, the need of transport to go. We can work. We are all in different places now using our internet to work. We don't have to report to the office. So that is just one policy there that talks about smart work, smart hour of working. But coming back to key examples, for example, the Lagos State, for example, had a policy at the point, I think there was a policy that came out about tree planting. One of the idea is that how can we control flood? How can we reduce the heat, what do you call it? Heat wave, or maybe impact of the heat on the people in the cities? How can the wind help to protect the wind that destroy the houses and the infrastructure? In their own policy statement, they came to the point of doing what they call tree planting, for example. Tree planting is just it's a sub-national agenda or initiative by the government of Lagos State, which have cut across many other states. Example, we have the green belt, the green wall around the northern part of Nigeria. These are just initiatives. These are taken from both the policies or the laws that are there. Every July 14, if I'm still correct, they still do the tree planting program. Tree, as you know, play both roles. It can both be an action towards adaptation. It can also be an action towards mitigation. That's one of those interventions that comes a successful program within Lagos State, helping to enrich the biodiversity of Lagos State. One of the beauty of those nature-based solutions is that it helps to restore back to those states those lost biodiversity, if I put it that way. So tree planting is one of those key examples. Now, one of those we've done again is the issue of mangrove restoration. At least there are two key examples I can point to. One at Sabon Koji, there's a village called Sabon Koji.
Okay, I think it's yes, one of the suburban areas in the Lekki axis, Sakoji, yes.
Well, maybe we should advise Mr. Oshaniwa to turn off his video. And that might help.
Okay. Mr. Oshaniwa, do you want to turn off the video? Okay, so let me send a direct message. Okay, I think we've lost him now. Mr. Bankole, do you want to speak while we get him to turn off the video and then he can continue afterwards? Mr. Bankole, please. Mr. Bankole?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay, so we're talking about what roles should national and subnational governments play in driving urban development and resilience, and what models are you aware of, and what are the successes that you can share with us in this call, please?
Well, I know that the national and the subnational work hand in hand to develop policies, and one of those policies, national adaptation policy, and the latest one was, I think, for gender. So the problem is we don't have issues with policy documents. We have policy documents, but the issues is how do we implement the policy document. Sometimes again, I have a little problem with national policy preparation, because all the national policy, what they do is they call people from the subnationals, from the government agencies to be part of development of policy that does not take into cognizance the people that the policies are meant for. So that is on one side. But above all, what we need to do, like Mr. Oshadwa was saying before now, is to begin to have footprint on the ground. Enough of documentation, enough of policy development. We need to begin to have actionable projects that we can look at. For us in Lagos, one of the things that we did first was to talk about showcasing what we are talking about. And Mr. Oshadiwa mentioned about tree planting exercise. Yeah. Then we've also seen the need for us to be able to reclaim our water banks, the Atlantic Ocean, the coastline, because of the rampant sea level rise that is taking place. And one of the solutions is to install groins and anchor pots. But these are very, very expensive solutions. So the low hanging solutions that we can see and we can quickly adopt here is to plant coconuts along the coastlines. The coconut trees will sound as a barrier, a breaker for the sea, so that they will not enter into the community or into the city. And Lascoda is aggressively doing that. They are planting coconut trees along the coastline. For education, Lagos State has 187 kilometers of coastline, ranging from Ekpe to Badagry. So, and another thing that we're also doing in terms of waste management, because we know that waste management is one of the sector that produces large emission from our emission inventory. About 30% of the total emission in Lagos come from waste management. And what we are doing right now is that we've done so many policy documents on organic waste, behavioral waste characterization, to get the waste per capita of every individual in Lagos, which is 0.665 kilogram per capita per person. So we have a small project that we are working at Ikosi, fruit market. And what we are doing is that we are converting the fruit market into energy. We are converting using a biogas process. That facility is going to take care of 500 kilograms of fruit waste per day. And we're expecting about 29 megawatts of power per annum. And we're using that plant to provide street lights for the market. We're also going to be giving gas to one of the vendors that uses firewood to cook by supplying him with energy at a very, very cheap price. We are also giving a CSR, a charging station, to people in the market to charge their phone. And you might say that this is a very, very small drop in the ocean. Yes, it's a small drop in the ocean. No foreign partner or investors or donor agencies want to put money into a project, into a nature-based solution that has not been proven. So we are using this Ikosi plant as a proof of concept. By the end of May, that plant will be fully operational. What we have done is that we have installed the biodigester, and we have also installed a 10 kVA inverter panel, so that at any point in time, if there is a breakdown or a downtime on the biodigester, the solar panel will kick in, and there will be constant supply at no fee to the marketers. And we are using that as a proof of concept so that we can develop in other traditional markets. And apart from that, Lagos State last year, we launched what we call Lagos State Climate Adaptation and Resilience Plan. And this plan has about 33 initiatives cutting across different sectors. So what we are doing right now is trying to shop for investors to partner with Lagos and build adaptation projects. Adaptation project that's going to make Lagos State more resilient. Somebody mentioned about early warning signs. I think we've not done well in terms of early warning signs because we make the announcement if there's going to be flood, move away, this and that. But there are things that we must also do, and which I have seen practicalized in Japan. And these are something that we are trying to, bring into our system. The LCAP is a 35, it's a 10-year program that we want to bring in about 10 billion US dollars. So, inject into adaptation projects, nation-based solutions, and make Lagos more resilient. And it must also interest you to know that we are building one of the biggest children hospital in sub-Saharan Africa. And that hospital, the design is a zero carbon hospital, whereby it's going to be powered by solar panels. There's going to be a lot of green area within that market. It's called Mercy Hospital. In that hospital, sorry, Mercy Hospital. And we have so many other things. Mr. Shaniwa spoke about our transport system. We have one of the most robust transport reform in Nigeria today. We are the first to use intra-city. Okay, we are the first to use the intra-city railway transportation. We've obtained grants of about 410 million euros for our eco water now, or eco waste for Mr. Ado, you are disturbing me. You are disturbing my thoughts. So we've got a grant of 410 million euros for our waterway transportation. And these are the things that we are doing. We are trying to see how we can, in our transport system, how we can expand our transport system rather than depending on road transportation alone. We are going into water transportation. We have the railway. We have red line and blue line already working. Now we are going to green and orange line. Before you know it, the whole Lagos will be connected by railway line. So we have different avenues. And the same thing we are doing in other sectors. In agriculture, we are building one of the largest agro hub in sub-Saharan Africa. And we are partnering with other states so that they can produce the food and then we can bring to our hub. We have one of the best rice mill here in Mota, along Ekwe. So we have articulated our plans and we are taking it one after the other. But above all, we need partnership. We need people to join us, and we need forward-thinking NGOs and the university to also help us make this get data, get us these solutions, and then we can work together to make Lagos more sustainable, make Nigeria more sustainable and resilient. And I think we are on the right track.
Okay, thank you so much. We're almost out of time, so I'd like to read. Mr. Shaniwa has started answering some of the questions on the chat box, particularly the one that was referred to him in respect of how we can protect our culture and heritage. And this question is for Dr. Jamina. I don't know if she's still on the call. It says, thanks for highlighting the important role of local governments. There are several challenges with regards to local governments exercising their powers as stipulated in national constitutions. How can local governments engage more in spite of their limited powers? Dr. Jamima, are you still on this call?
No, she's not. So she put a message that she had a family emergency and she needs to.
Oh, okay. So she's put the link for the policy paper on the chat box. The other question I have, okay, so we don't have any other question aside from that. Dr. Orie is asking if we can get the slides, and I hope that Okay, I hope the slides will be shared to the participants after the meeting. Then, okay, it's still the same thing about, yeah, this one says, I like to highlight the disconnect between town and gown. So please highlight some of the policies that is preparing Lagos for its vision of being a sustainable city, especially in view of ongoing conversations about a just transition. Mr. Bankole, I think that is directed at you. Can you please just give us in 3 minutes your perspective on that, please? 3 minutes, please.
I think I've answered that in my previous comment.
Yes, I know you.
Now we have what we have done. What we have done is that we have strengthened our relationship with Unilag and LASU so that we can collaborate more on mutually benefiting projects. For us in Lagos, I've mentioned some of the policies that we have. Lagos State Climate Adaptation and Resilience Plan. If you Google it, you'll see the whole document there, and you see what we are planning to do. The Lagos Climate Action Plan, which is coming to an end this year, we are going to start the review and the update of that plan for another 5 years or 10 years. We have the Lagos Resilience Strategy that is also going through a review right now. We have the mass transit, non-motorized transport system policy in Lagos. We have the Lagos State electricity law that has just been passed. So we have a lot of, just go to your search box and put one relevant topic on education or energy or transportation, and you see what Lagos State is doing. We understand where we are going climate change wise. We understand that we cannot wait. We understand that we need more actions, and then we are not relenting, collaborating with everybody that we need to collaborate with so that we can get solutions to the problem that we have identified.
Thank you so much. Lagos has been at the front burner of climate change actions in Nigeria, and it's quite commendable. I'm going to like to ask the last question because of our time, and between yourself and Mr. Shaniwaz, I said, what key policy recommendations would you propose for building a climate resilient city in Africa? Okay, for building climate resilient cities in Africa, particularly in the context of limited resources and deep social inequalities. Mr. Shaniwaz, when speaking the other time, said something about that finance is a crucial factor in climate action, but he was thinking about putting it behind so that we can talk about more strategies, and then as we're looking at the strategies, we can talk about how we can raise finances for them. So, Mr. Shaniwaz, would you want to tell us what are the key policy recommendations you would like to suggest for building climate resilient cities in Africa with considerations for limited resources? Mr. Shaniwaz, please. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me now.
You have 2 minutes.
Oh, quickly. Okay. So I think the answer is based on the presentation made by Jenna. For one, we always talk about sustainable cities. But when you look at the framework of sustainable city, it said sustainable cities and communities. We have for long tried to separate those two, but they cannot be separatable. I think that's where the policy gap is. We must start seeing those cities and community as one, because if you look at in reality, we have more of urban and peri-urban now, because many of those cities now are connected to the rural areas. So that's where the local government comes in. I think it's high time we need to empower more of the local government, or the lower power. I won't say the lower power, but I'm talking about the community aspect of it. The more we can be able to draw that lessons between the communities itself and city, then I think we're making practical. So what we have been doing has been focusing more on the city and not on the communities. But by the time we see there's a connection between both of them, then we can be able to talk about building a future and resilient city. So I think my policy recommendation would be, let's look at the gap between what is there now and try to address those gaps in terms of knowledge gap, in terms of maybe resources. When we talk about resources are there, though limited, they are adaptation resources. The question is that resources can only be channeled to a well-defined agenda or solution. So if we have a well-designed agenda that connect both the cities and community, then can we be able to appropriate the right finance or resources to those challenges. So my policy will be look at the gap between the cities and communities and then move forward with that. So that'll be my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bankole, please, your perspectives. Mr. Bankole, sir.
I think we need, not taking away anything away from Mr. Toyi, I think we need more money. We need more money. And if you try to introduce carbon tax, I know they will shut us down. But many people, yesterday I was reading about carbon markets, carbon offsets. We don't do that in Nigeria yet. And we are encouraging the federal government to come up with a framework on carbon trading so that we can get more money. And also, I think African continent must join in alliance with other rights, thinking continents to force the developed countries to come through on all these donations on climate loss and damage, all these grants, because all these grants are just there. Every year we talk about increasing the grants, nobody's collecting the money. So we need more money to be able to do more climate resilient structures and infrastructure in Africa or in our communities. Thank you very much.
Okay, okay, Tony has his hand up. Tony, you can speak, please.
In 1 minute, just to, Mr. Bankole mentioned carbon market. Now, one of my role, just to tell you a practical example, in Nigeria currently, and I'm in the field, so the carbon market is a financial mechanism. So what we're doing recently, one of the projects working with Up Energy to be able to put in our communities. The question is that, are they affordable? So recently we are deploying and doing some feasibility study on electric cooking for Nigeria. So that's the role of a carbon market, looking at it as a financial mechanism to address those. Also, in those who are providing a market, this can only be made available through carbon market access. So yes, money is needed, but I said we need to define those projects appropriately according to our guidelines and methodologies, and then we can now annex those money. Just an example to give on field. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, gentlemen, and Dr. Jamima. I understand she has left the call. Any last minutes inputs, Mr. Bankole? Mr. Bankole, sir. Any final thoughts? Any final thoughts? More collaboration.
Sustainability. Yeah, so sustainability is about collaboration. We need to collaborate. We need to break all the barriers. We need to talk more. We need to share data among ourselves. That's how we can be heard, and that's why we can make meaningful change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I want to say thank you, Dr. Tony. Do you have anything to say, please?
I have nothing else to add other than to say a very big thank you to very distinguished speakers. It's been a very, very interesting conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so thank you, everyone, for joining our discussion today. Thank you to Mr. Bankole, Mr. Tony Oshaniwa, and Dr. Jamina. We hope you will join us on the next call when we have another interesting discussion on the topical areas of climate action. Thank you also for our participants that have joined today. We hope we've been able to meet your expectations, and whatever questions that you have, further questions you might have, you can send it to the email. I think it's in the chat box, and we will revert back to you on that. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you on another call. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, and have a blessed day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Bankole. Thank you, Mr. Shaniwa. Thank you,
Thank you
Jenna.
so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having us.
Interesting conversations today.
Thank you, Mr. Bankole. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Thank you so much.
Ogato, send my CEO.
Mr. Bankole, thank you so much for coming.
Send
on board.
my British tea or my London tea.